I'm going to show you the key techniques that will enable you to do this real-time dynamic search filtering on your own spreadsheets. Let's go. So this video is massively inspired by a video on the Office Lab by Marco on dynamic data search boxes. Now he has created a two-part tutorial and it's excellent. It's absolutely excellent. Definitely go and look at that. Now what I'm going to do is take you through the key techniques within those tutorials that will allow you to do this yourself, and not only that, I'm going to add in a few extra bonuses along the way, sort of my take on some of his ideas, and also how you can achieve the same results even if you don't have one of the brand new versions of Excel or Excel 365. So I'm just going to play you the intro from Marco's video so you can hear for yourself what it is that is going to be achieved in this lesson.
Part 1, I'm going to show you how to implement this real-time data filtering with a search box from scratch, and also how to implement different search modes. We will implement all these side by side, and at the end I show you how to combine them into one search result area, for which you can simply select the search mode via a drop-down list.
Straight away, even part 1 alone, brilliant. Loads of functionality there that you can build into your spreadsheets, but just wait till you see what he builds in
I will
part
show
2.
you how to do this real-time search in multiple columns, either via single column selection, multi-column selection, and even with multiple search boxes.
This is not about replicating Marco's video. He's done a great job already. This is about pulling out the key techniques, summarizing them and adding my take on them so that you can do this yourself on much larger data sets. Okay, technique number 1, and this is brilliant. This is absolutely brilliant. I've never actually come across this before. And this is how you make in-cell calculations happen in real time. So what do I mean by that? Well, in this cell here, I've just got a very simple formula, which is the uppercase of whatever I type in B6. So if I type in hello there, hit enter, get uppercase in there. But notice how when I type, nothing changes until I hit enter. And what we want to do with real-time searches is we want things to be able to change as we type, right? So how are we going to do that? It's actually pretty straightforward, right? And the answer is that we use a text box linked to the cell. And I've got one set up here and I've purposely made it look exactly like the cell. And as I type in that text box now, you'll see that every character I type effectively is coming out in uppercase in the formula. You don't have to wait until anyone presses enter. And that's an absolutely key technique that we're going to use for anything we want to happen real time in spreadsheets. And I haven't thought of many use cases yet, but clearly filtering is one, but there must be a ton more. So if you've got other use cases, please put them in the comments because I'd love to hear about them. Anyway, I'm just going to show you then how you actually set up this text box quickly, because you've got to use the right one and all this sort of stuff. So go to the developer tab. Please tell me you got the developer tab, but if you haven't, go to more commands on that drop down menu there, customize the ribbon and tick it there. If you cannot tick it, you need to contact your system administrator. It's probably been pinned down. On the developer tab, go into design mode, insert an ActiveX text box, and you can draw that freehand. You can hold down Alt and snap it to the grid, whatever, it doesn't matter. Point is, when you're in there, click on the properties, find the link cell and link it to the cell. So in this case, that would be B6. Now, little bonus tip here, what I would actually do is I would make B6 a named range. So I'd click on there, call that, like, I don't know, name input, say, or search perhaps, doesn't really matter, does it? hit enter there, and then on this text box I would say I want to link it to an search. And the reason that I would want to do that is because if that cell moves and you've hard coded your text box to B6, you know, you insert a row, it's now in B7, everything's going to fail. So make it a name range, it'll follow the cell around as you come past. Now, also making that look like a cell, there's a few key things to watch out for, just save you a bit of time doing that. So obviously your back color, you need to, in fact, I would say back style actually, just make it transparent, and that way you're going to see through it. Border, you want to either get rid of the border or put one on if you haven't got one. I don't know, depends what you want it to look like. This sunken effect is going to make it look totally different. And the other one that's key is selection margin. Cells don't have selection margins. You'll see it just moves that text to the left as if it looks like a cell. And then the other thing is the size. You just need to make sure that the size of the cells, the height and the width, etc., is just like 1 point underneath the cell height. Because if you make exactly the cell height, when you go in and type in it, you'll see that, well, I'll do it here just so that we come out of design mode. When I click in there, it whites out the background. So it's no longer transparent when you click in it. And if you've got it exactly on cell borders, it will cover up those borders and be obvious. So that's just a few points. But the key point, text box linked to a cell makes all the calculations based off of that cell happen in real time. Technique number 2, the filter function. Okay, so this is a relatively new function. So if you haven't got that, don't worry, because I'm going to show you a completely independent method of doing it at the end of this video, but make sure that you can apply these techniques to all versions of Excel. It's just the end filtering that you'll have to do differently if you don't have the filter function. Anyway, what on earth is the filter function? It's actually pretty straightforward. So you type in a filter, it wants an array, and then it wants to know what to include in or how to filter that array. And then you've got this optional argument to say whether you want to give a message or you want to do something different if no results are found. I've set this data up as a table, and you'll see why, because I can just literally do that, and then this whole table will come in like one array. And I say, what do I want to include? Well, I'm going to say, well, I want to include the products that equal whatever is in my search text box. Now, the reason I clicked outside of that and then moved to the left with the arrow keys is because my actual search box is a text box, as in technique number 1, and you can't just click on a text box. Right, so I want it to equal that. I'll ignore the if empty argument at the moment to keep things simple. Now, that's coming up with a calc error because there's nothing in here. But if I type paper in here, you'll see we instantly result in showing everything paper. What about tables? Tables, there we go. So that's how the filter function works, and we're going to be using that throughout, but like I say, I'm going to step you through as we go. Right, the third technique he introduces, and this I think is genius, if you hold on a minute, partial matching. So I'm just going to put AN in that box there for the moment, right? So that we've got something sort of generating results. I'm going to go through all of these techniques in a similar way. So firstly, I'm going to show you how you can create a column that will produce like a series of sort of true falses in your table. That's key if you don't have the filter function, by the way, for later on. Then how you turn that into a dynamic array that's kind of independent of the table, and then how you can use that dynamic array inside the filter function to create your sort of filtered list of results. So let's go. This is where the real magic happens in the table. The rest is just conversion. So partial match then. So if I want to find the letters A, N in this anywhere in here, so I don't want stuff that starts with AN, I want AN to be anywhere in it, then I'm going to need somewhere searching, and that's exactly what we can do. We can use the search function. So find the text, well, let's F4 to fix that, pick up the search text result. Within the text, well, go over to the product column. Don't need the optional argument. So there we go. Right. Straightforward, apart from we're getting all these errors, we're getting multiple values. How are we going to use that in a filter? You can filter out errors perhaps, but it's all a bit messy. No, it's a very simple solution. Embed that whole formula in an isNumber formula. And that's going to give us a whole series of trues and falses. And because it's giving a true or a false, we can essentially use that as our criteria inside the filter function to produce a table where they just equal true. So I've actually previously gone through and set this up with some conditional formatting, and you'll see this throughout, where I've just picked this one to show like greens and reds for ones and zeros. And I've done that so that I can just shove like a double negative. Putting a double negative in front of a true or a false will turn it into a 1 or a 0, make it binary. So by doing that, we can sort of see very clearly exactly what's matching and what isn't. So as I type in like book, for example, you can see that, or type in P, there's loads, but as we go on, we narrow it down to paper. How do we turn that into a dynamic array that we can then use in our filter function? So if I just copy that whole formula without the sort of minus on the front though, and it doesn't like it. Why doesn't it like it? It's highlighting this sort of table reference, and that's because that style of table reference only works when you're inside a table. So I need to get rid of that, but it's actually fine because we can just click on like that, as long as this arrow's here. Click on that, puts the whole thing in. We need the table name in front, hit that, and you can see we now get a spilled array, so the blue border there, everything true or false, and all these trues will line up with the ones on the table at the moment. So we now have our filter criteria. So if I just copy that filter criteria there and put it inside the filter, so again our array is going to be all of that for now. Then our criteria, again I'm going to leave the optional argument blank for the moment, and there you go. Right, so this, when I type in bin now, binders, etc., type P, we're getting all sorts of stuff here, but as I narrow it down, P-E-N, say, yeah, pens. I don't need to start with that, of course I could just go with art, or imagine I want sort of I wanted telephone communications, I'll put an extra M in, yeah. You know, so this is great already, 3 techniques in, a great filtering system already, but way more than that obviously. So technique number 4 that Marco goes through is matching from the left only. Now this is one of his 3 types of matching. So he has exact matching, partial matching, and left partial matching, I think he calls it. Now left partial matching is great where you just want to narrow stuff down by the start letter of the word. So on here, for example, when I type in B, you'll see that I get things in the filtered list like table, because it's got a B in it, and label. And that's not necessarily what we want. We might want to narrow our selection immediately down to everything starting with B, and that's what this technique does. And it's actually straightforward. So I'm going to put that B in there because we know that that has caused us an issue before. So we want to narrow down the left of that. So we're going to use the left function. And the text we want to get the left of, or the leftmost characters of that, this product field. Now, how many characters do we want? Well, we don't want to just like fix that number and say, oh, it's 1. anything, and we just end up searching on the first letter. However, we want to narrow it down as we go to take advantage of our kind of dynamic calculation that we've got going on here. So what we can say is that the number of characters to include in our search is going to be the len function, of whatever we've entered as a search. So as we type more letters, the search expands to include more letters. So that is going to be our left function. So if you'll see here, that will give us the first letter of everything in the product. But to turn that into a column of trues and falses, all we need to say is that it equals our C5, which is our search box there, and that will turn that into a series of trues and false. Now, just so it shows up on our bit more clearly, I'm going to put a double negative on that. I have to encase the entire formula in parentheses there, and we can now see that every time we start with a B, we're getting a 1, but we're not picking up things like tables where there's a B inside. So again, if we do A, we're only getting appliances. P, we're getting paper and pens, but PE now, we've just narrowed that down to just pens. PA, you can see that knocks out the pens. So this is an alternative way of searching, really. You probably want to do one or the other, and that's where I'd strongly suggest you have a look at Marco's video, because he goes through how you can combine these different sorts of searches within a single formula. I'll give you a clue. He uses the if statement and a drop down box. Anyway, right. We need to turn that formula into a dynamic array. I think hopefully by now you're going to get the hang of it. So we're going to use that piece there, like that. Of course, it won't like it because of doesn't like the table referencing. So we replace it with that table reference. There's our true and false. Again, I'll have that. Thank you very much. I'll use it inside my filter function. So my array is going to be all of that. Here's the get shot of that equal sign, and there we go. There's all the paper, and I do that. There's all the pen. Art won't pick anything up. Now, interestingly, this is a good example of when you might want to have the optional argument on your filter, because what we could do is put, say, the word none on the end there, and then it will show none if nothing comes up. So this is about switching the columns that you're searching, because up until now everything has been about searching in one column, so the product column. And Marco takes this to a fine art on the Office Lab video, where he sort of has drop downs and tick boxes and multiple search criteria and things like that. So definitely go and check that out after this. But right now I want to show you the core technique for switching columns, and it relies on using tables in Excel. Because the great thing about tables is that the columns can be referred to by name. So as you see, if I just say, well, this equals customer, you see the formula it's using, it just says equals customer, yeah? So I might be able to sort of use a cell with the word customer in it to kind of replicate the choice of column. And that's essentially what we're going to do. So first off, we need a little drop down box here that allows us to select the column. I have an entire playlist, more than one playlist in fact, of drop down box videos and how to create them and the various different types, all sorts of stuff on them. So please, if you're interested in drop down boxes, go and have a look at those at the end of this video. But for now, I'm just going to put in probably the most simplest, the data validation list. And in the source, I'm just going to highlight those two column headings, right? And I don't need to transpose it or anything like that. Just highlight them and hit OK. And that gives me a drop-down box with those two in it. And obviously, I had more headings, it wouldn't matter. Pick them all up. So there's customer, right? So So what would be nice to do is say, well, what if I took out the word customer there and just clicked on F5 there and said, there you know, that'll do, won't it? No, doesn't like it. Right, okay, well, why not? And the reason is that we're now using, we might not realise it, but we're using like indirect referencing. Like for example, you couldn't say, put the letter A in a cell and say it equals that cell and 1 and expect it to pick up cell A1, but the indirect function does allow you to do that. So if I put indirect around here, and then it's asking for reference text, and it's basically, I need to sort of form this as in quotes and put like the and symbol to combine it with the text. So when I add all that, sort of merge all that text together, it's going to say customer. In fact, let me just do that a second, right? Let's get rid of the indirect. Just put that like that. You see, so it's saying at customer. So if I now put an indirect function around that, hopefully it's going to work. It's not, by the way. No, it's giving me a ref. Now, why is that? The reason is that because it's indirect, it needs to know the table name as well. So it's actually just quite a simple case of putting in the table name at the beginning of that. And then we have it saying customer, right? So it's now just replicating that customer column. And if we switch to product, it'll replicate the product column. So what? Well, I tell you, so what? Forget blimmin' filtering or anything like that. Having dynamic columns that you can change with a drop-down list is a fantastic reporting tool for like dashboards, just general reports, all sorts of things. Imagine being able to, you know, change a sales report into a profit report like instantly with a drop-down list, like drop-down box like that, just by being able to pick up different columns of data and switch it all around, having completely dynamic column names essentially. So I think this on its own is a brilliant technique, but what we want to know is how we're going to use that. So let's say we're putting AN, because I just happen to know we get some decent results from that. So this formula then becomes just where we're going to search. So if we embed that whole thing in our search, so our search, remember, was to search for C5, and then we call this our within text and hit enter, we are essentially back to our whole list of sort of numbers and errors, etc., which we can then embed in an isNumber function to give us our true false. And I'm just going to put the double negative at the beginning of it, just so that we can see clearly things changing on screen. So that's product. Change it to customer, and there's our customer matches, and you can see Susan, etc. So we need to turn this into a dynamic array. So let's take this and put it in here and hit enter, and oh, we're not getting a spilled array. Why is that? Very simple. This @ sign here we incorporated, and it means in table sort of referencing notation to pick up the row that you're in, so that field for the current row. So actually all we need to do is get rid of that, and we got our spilled array because it'll pick up every row. So a lot less messing about than we were doing before. Again, build it into our filter as the so we'll do that. It becomes our filter criteria, hit enter, there we go. This is everything with an AN in it. If I start doing paper, you can see we'll look like that. Pens, yeah. What about we do ER? So we're getting all sorts of stuff, but as we go down to Eric, again we're getting the calc because we didn't bother to put in our final argument of none. So that's how you might want to switch columns. So previous technique was about switching columns, but actually you probably don't need to switch columns, because what you could do is some kind of multiple column search where you could say, well, I want that one and that one, or that one or that one. And incidentally, actually, Market goes one better, and he uses sort of tick boxes, so you can say, well, I want that column and this column, and you can tick and untick. I'm not going to go into that. You can go and look at his video for tips on how to do that. But essentially, it's about using if statements again. But what if we want to just search across both these columns for whatever we type in here? So again, we'll use AN because I know it comes up with results. Now, if we go all the way back to our original partial match formula here, which was this one, and I'm just going to copy that formula into here. So we've got our original partial match for product. But if we get rid of the double negative and take that, and actually, believe it or not, all we need to do, because it's coming up with trues or falses or ones and zeros, is add it to another search, and instead of the product column, we put in the customer column. So we'll add the search result as a number from the product column to the search result as a number from the customer column, right? And you can see now we're getting either 2s, 1s or 0s. So 2 is obviously where both columns are included, and 1s are where only one column is included. So you can see probably how we're going to deal with this, that a 2 is effectively we have an AND match. We have something where it's in both columns, whereas a 1 would be that it's in one column or the other. And so we can make use of that to say whether we want an AND or an OR. But if you definitely want an AND, if you take that plus sign and you change it to a multiplication, if any column it can't find, it returns a 0. It's anything times by 0 is 0, so you end up with just the 2's changing into 1s, and everything else becoming a 0. So an AND match, you just times those two together. An OR match, you add them together. So what if you want your OR match to just display trues and false, as we know we need? So you could put all of that in brackets, and you could put not equal to 0. And there you go, you now have your all trues and falses. And we could, just for demonstration purposes, put that whole thing in brackets to create our 1s and 0s back. So we're now in a position to turn this into a dynamic array. So let's do that. So again, we're going to try and put that like that. Doesn't like it because of that product. Right, again, doesn't like it. This time because of the search on customer. So we'll do that. And there we go, there's our dynamic array of trues and falses. So add that to the filter. Now normally I just copy and paste that into the filter criteria, but it's going to make for quite a long formula, and you can imagine if you've got lots of columns how long that formula is going to get. Now I have a workaround bonus coming up in a second, but I just want to show you something else you could do if you're prepared to use a helper column, which might sort of help with auditing your spreadsheets if they're going to other people. So we're going to filter that array, and our criteria, all I'm going to do is click on that cell, put the hash sign, that will give it tell it to pick up the entire spilled array. Might as well now put my none on, and look how short that single formula is now. Hit enter, and there's our filtered results. So again, I could put in paper, pen, what was some of the other stuff, tables, etc., etc., kind of Susan, yeah. So that's how you can do and or matching. And Marco, like I say, takes it one step further because he builds in checkboxes so you can switch this on and off using if statements to check on the result checkbox. But little bonus, because what if you have a load of columns? Now I've got 8 on here that you might want to search, right? And you want to search all of those, and you don't really care what columns things are appearing in. You just want sort of like almost search everything kind of thing, really, like a bit of your mini version of Google. So what you can do really is just create a search column and then link your formulas to this search column. Now you could, you know, if you're using very old versions of Excel without these formulas, you can start saying it's that and, you know, some spaces and that, you know, you could do that. I'm actually going to use the text join function to do this. So if you've got a newer version of Excel, you'll be able to do this. Text join, one of the first things it asked was the delimiter. So I'm just going to put that in. You know, virtually every other formula, it asks for the array first. But anyway, the delimiter, whether or not you want to ignore empty cells, well, it doesn't matter really. And then you can just, the great thing about this, you can just click on these one at a time and comma separate them, close the brackets, and there you go. You've got some massive great concatenation really of all your cells. And then of course you can, I'll just put that AN in there mode. You can then just link up your search to that search column, and then you'll get sort of huge numbers and things like that. But again, you know, start by now, you're probably well used to this. Put it in your is number, and you got your trues and falses, and then you're basically searching across anything. Then any field you want, you can search. And that technique can be very useful if you've got many columns and you don't want to do sort of multiple criteria of like anding, as long as you can, if you just want to search across your entire data. So this is the last one of Marcus' techniques that I'm going to talk about in brief here. So it's about using multiple searches. So I can use we could do this as an and or an or. The point is that this is where things start to get really useful. We want to say that on here, for example, we want to find the word office and small in the same area. So I'm going to use my search column to look for this, because this is where I think that multiple columns, double searching is really useful. So you're not having to stipulate which columns you're searching in. You're just saying, I just want anything small in Office. You know, I want like, you know, anything kind of like paper and sent by air or something like that. So how are we going to do it? Well, really quite straightforward. We're going to do our search again. The text that we're going to find is the first box. We're going to look for it in there. Obviously we need to put this into an is number formula. So I want this to be an and result. In other words, like both pieces of search text have to be found in order to achieve a result. So I'm going to need to multiply that by the other search. So I'm just going to paste the exact same search. Now it's still the search column, but this time we're just going to be picking up E5. Now when I do that, sorry, I needed to multiply it. There we go. We're basically coming up with zeros all the time, but let's have a look. So Office on its own is like that. Let's try Office West. So this is Office stuff to the west, potentially, don't know. And we're getting a result. Again, we want to build that into a dynamic array, so we can copy this, put it here, take out, as you hopefully by now know, we need to put in the table name, so we're just going to take out that, replace it with that, and the same for this one. And there's our dynamic array, and we can use that as our filter result. So because there's only one column reference in there now, I'm going to put that into the actual formula, and this time I'm only going to select up to sales column because there's no need to bring in these search columns in our results. So we'll just bring that to there. You can see as I drag along, the formula's doing all the work really. What am I going to include? Well, the formula I just came up with is my dynamic array. There we go. There's all my results for Office and West. What if I put in Anna and West? So there we go. Noticeably that's coming up north with Northwest, so could just do that. And there you go, a dynamic sort of dual search really. I do have more for you because all of this, what I've been through really requires you to have modern versions of Excel, a lot of the formulas for example, but in particular the kind of end result of every technique has been to use the filter function. So if you don't have the filter function, you know, what are you going to do? And this is where you don't have access to this filter function, or as I came across when I was building my sort of downloads pack index here, you need to return within your filter results actual pictures. So I've got the thumbnails of my videos, for example, coming up in these filters. The filter function is not going to do the job there, so you need a different technique. Now, I'll just demonstrate that this kind of works perfectly. You know, if I put, say, like format, you'll see as I type, we're getting some kind of reduction in these pictures or whatever. We've got a few here. Format, pivot, and you can see we're getting right down now to pivot table formats, basically. So this is why I created it, and I'll use this technique to be able to filter on kind of all columns, all data, bring back pictures. No need for any kind of modern versions of Excel formulae, but you do need only one line of VBA code and you can record that. Incidentally, if you want to get hold of this downloads pack with this searchable index, you get all the files, you know, all the workbooks, templates, cheat sheets, etc. You get links to all ad-free versions of the videos too. So if you're interested in that, there's a link in the description and tells you how you can get hold of it. So as I went through all of the different techniques in Marco's video, I set them up as a column in the table so that you could see how to get the result. And any of these really, you could simply just click on here and filter, and you'd get a filtered list. And so, but that's not dynamic. It's certainly not going to work with the search result. So with your search box, so how are you going to do it? If we want to use this on older versions of Excel, the key is having this kind of match column set up and linked to, you know, whatever you want it to search really. In this case, I'm using my original sort of concatenation now. Bear in mind I'm using text join, but you don't have to use text join. You can manually add everything together. The key thing is you need a column that you can click a filter button on, because what we're going to do is I'm just going to put in AN for now because we know to give us a result. And I'm just going to record a macro of me filtering that button to only show entries with the number 1 in. Okay, so if we go on the developer tab, record a macro, doesn't matter, hit that, select 1, okay, and then I'm going to stop that macro recording. All right, great. Alt AC will take off that filter for the moment. And then what I'm going to do, I'll go into the VBA window, and you should find somewhere a module 1 or something like that, and you'll see that you'll get the code that is just recorded. You might need to look around, but here it is. And here's the line that it's recorded, and just for information, it's referring to the table name on the active sheet, you know, and it's saying I want you to auto filter column 12 to only equal 1. Now it doesn't really matter what that says. You can make it more flexible later if you want, if you know your VBA. But the point is, let's just copy that, and we're going to go to the code within the sheet we were working on, which was this T8 sheet name here, and we need to put this code and attach it to the text box. And the way we do that is click down on here, you'll see the text box that was there, and that will create a module for you, a subroutine for you, and it's actually an event-driven subroutine based off the change of a text box, and that's good enough. That's exactly what we want as it happens. And if it isn't, you can change the criteria here, but let's give it as change. So all I've done is paste that code in there. So what's going to happen? Every time the text box changes, it's going to filter column 12 so that only equals 1. That's it. It's job done, you know, because now if I go in there and change that letter, you'll see the filter kicking in, AN, and you can see it's now filtering, yeah, and so everything's filtering as I type. This actually has some advantages over using the filter function. For a start, it's filtering your actual data on screen as you type. So if you wanted to use it for some sort of dashboard or something, this might be a better way to go. You could always hide that sort of match and search column, just to hide the columns and tidy it up. But I guess the disadvantage of this is that you need to use macros. Even though it's one line of code, you're going to have users going to need to enable macros and things like that to get it to work. So again, I've got some techniques and workarounds to make sure people do that. So check out my playlist on macros if you want to learn a bit more. But essentially, this is how you get round dynamically as you type on older versions of Excel. So that's it for now. There's a link to this workbook and all of my formulas and setup, etc. in the description. There's also links to Marco's video on the Office Lab, or videos I should say, if you want more details and you want to see this stuff like being combined and making more sort of slick. He also offers a free download of the spreadsheet, so you can get both of them. So I strongly suggest you go and do that. Hope this has been useful. I'll see you soon.